Good morning. My name is Claire Zimmerman, and I am a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. Yay! My grandparents were Unitarian Universalists. This church is my home because I love the friends I have met here. I love the way this faith challenges me to be a better person, and I love the way when we come together, we can make a positive difference in the world. I want to acknowledge right now what our sexton Lillian and our administrator Charlene went through to get this service together today. Power came on here at the church on Friday, and since then there has been a firestorm of organizing and printing and cleaning to get ready for us today. So please, when you see them, acknowledge them. I wasn't sure if one of them might not quit before today, but I think they're still on. So if you are visiting with us today, welcome. We are glad you are here and hope you return often and find a religious home with us. To all, if you have experienced loss or hardship related to Hurricane Beryl, we are holding you in our hearts. Please let me know if there is something we can do to help. We also want to acknowledge the horror of the assassination attempt on former President Trump last night. We are holding in our hearts all the victims from that event and their families. Our minister, Reverend Katie McQuaige-Lucas, is away on her summer study leave today. We are pleased to have David Throop offering our sermon. David has been an active UU since 1978 and a member of BAUUC since 1993. Thank you, David. He has long been a lay preacher and has spoken at most of the pulpits in the greater Houston area. He works as a data scientist for Boeing, where he does artificial intelligence work. He and his wife, Kathy, have raised 4 children in this church. Let's see, Lynn Young will light our chalice today. Hurricanes serve as somber reminders of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of our existence. Witnessing the destructive power of hurricanes forces us to confront the reality that everything we hold dear can be taken away in an instant. It heightens our awareness of the impermanence of life and compels us to cherish every single moment we have with our loved ones. We light this flame today in gratitude for waking up this morning to a new day with family and friends. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening song. We're going old school today, no slides. So you have to pick up your hymnal, open it up. It's number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. So we'll wait just a second while people find it in their hymnals. They haven't done this in a long time. Okay, let's go. Our covenant is the promise we make to each other to walk together in faith. The words are printed in your order of worship. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship. Thus do we covenant with one another.
Well, this past week, I think we all experienced about the worst that summer in Houston has to offer. I said about, there's room for worsening always. But to give us all a little break right now, here is a song about autumn in Japan.
Good morning. My name is Gloria Miller, and I'm the Director of Religious Education here at Bay Area Unitarian Universalist Church, and my pronouns are she, her. Our story for all ages today is Maybe Something Beautiful by F. Ezaville Canopy. In the heart of a gray city, there lived a girl who loved to doodle, draw, color, and paint. And every time she saw a blank piece of paper, Mira thought to herself, maybe. And because of this, her room was filled with color, and her heart was filled with joy. On her way to school one day, Mira gave a round apple to Mr. Henry, the owner of the shop down the street. She gave a flower to Ms. Lopez, the lady with the sparkling eyes. She gave a songbird to Mr. Sachs and a red heart to the policeman who walked up and down the streets. On her way home, Mira taped a glowing sun onto the wall hiding in the shadows. Her city was less gray, but not much. Then the next day, Mira saw a man with a pocket full of paintbrushes. He gazed at the wall, he looked at her son, he held his fingers up in a square and he peered through them. He said thoughtfully. What do you see, Mira asked. Maybe something beautiful, the man replied. Then, just like that, he dipped a brush in the paint. Bam, pow, the shadows scurried away. Sky blue cut through the gloom. The man's laughter was like a rainbow spreading across the sky. Who are you? Mira asked. I'm an artist, a muralist. I paint on walls. Well, I'm an artist too, she told him. Well, then, come on. Mira dipped it in the loudest color that she saw, and the wall lit up like sunshine. And as the man drew pictures on the bricks, Mira added color, punch, pizzazz. And then soon Mr. Sachs joined in, and then came others, and everyone painted to the rhythm. Salsa, merengue, bebop. Even Mira's mama painted and danced the cha-cha-cha. The whole neighborhood became a giant block party. Until the policeman walked up. Excuse me, he said. And the music stopped. Mira put her brush down. They were surely in trouble. The officer cleared his throat and paused. May I paint with you? He asked. So Mira handed him a paintbrush, and the music started again. Teachers and papas joined in, babies too. Mira and the man handed out brush after brush. Colors spread throughout the streets, and so did joy. And wherever Mira and the man went, art followed like the string of a kite. After they colored the walls, they painted utility boxes and benches. They decorated sidewalks with poetry. Everyone danced. And together they created something more beautiful than they had ever imagined. And when their clothes were spattered with a million colors, everyone sat down to rest, except the muralist. His eyes sparkled. You, my friends, are all artists, he told them. The world is your canvas. He smiled wide, and then he pulled everything together in a big sweeping motion. His paintbrush was like a magic wand, and when he was finished, Mira added, one more bird, way up in the sky. Maybe, she thought, just maybe. Thank you. Our keeper of the flame today is Rusty. After we recess, we will be going to the children's wing to continue making our kidsmeal.org lunch bags so that we can deliver them to the Kids Meal organization in August.
Note that the words for the children's song are printed in your order of worship. Please join me in passing our flame. We pass this flame of religious freedom from generation to generation. And now, the children's song? Yeah. words are from Scott Phillips. Ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a spiritual community where we find meaning. Ours is a sharing community where our joys are amplified, a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. We take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge the mutual support of our community. If you would like, you may come forward to light a candle to acknowledge a special joy or sorrow you have in your heart. If you would like a candle brought to you, please raise your hand. We light a candle today for all of those still managing the effects of Hurricane Beryl, for those who lost loved ones in the storm, for the crews working to bring back electricity to our city today. For those who slept badly last night in the heat, for those with damaged homes and neighborhoods. We light candles for all the victims of the assassination attempt of former President Trump. And we light one final candle for all of our joys and sorrows, which went unacknowledged today.
Join me now in a moment of silent meditation and a prayer. This is a prayer. This is a prayer for this community. May those in this community who reached out to their friends and their fellows and strangers in this storm and in this week of turmoil bring a blessing upon us. May this community hearken to the lessons of tragedy and turmoil and grow in wisdom. May this community knit together the harms and the trauma that the week has brought. May we be whole. May we come together. Please rise as you are able and join in singing Find a Stillness, 352 in the gray hymnal. The psychologist Jonathan Haidt writes, "The power of positive moral emotions to uplift and transform people has long been known, but not by psychologists. In 1771, Thomas Jefferson's friend, Robert Skipworth, wrote to him asking for advice on what books to buy for his library and for his own education. Jefferson sent a long list of titles in history, philosophy, and natural science. But in addition to those obviously educational works, Jefferson advised the inclusion of some works of fiction. Jefferson justified this advice by pointing to the beneficial emotional effects of great fiction. Everything is useful which contributes to fix us in the principles and the practice of virtue, wrote Jefferson. When any act of charity or gratitude, for instance, is presented either to our sight or to our imagination, we are deeply impressed with its beauty and feel a strong desire in ourselves of doing charitable and grateful acts also. On the contrary, when we see or read of any atrocious deed, we are disgusted with its deformity and conceive an abhorrence of vice. Now, every emotion of this kind is an exercise of our own virtuous dispositions. And dispositions of the mind, like limbs of the body, acquire strength by exercise. Jefferson goes on to say that the physical feelings and motivational effects caused by a good novel are as powerful as those caused by real episodes. Writes Jefferson, I ask whether the fidelity of Nelson, the generosity of Blandford and Marmontel do not dilate the reader's breast and elevate his sentiments as much as any similar incident which real history can furnish. Does he not, in fact, feel himself a better man while reading them and privately covenant to copy their fair example? Jefferson, and Haidt writes, Jefferson identified over 200 years ago the major features of an emotion that we call elevation. Elevation. Elevation is elicited by acts of virtue or moral beauty. It causes warm, open feelings in the chest, and it motivates people to behave more virtuously themselves, to covenant to copy the fair example. Elevation, therefore, seems to fit easily into modern appraisals and theories of emotions. Yet elevation and some related moral emotions, such as awe and gratitude and admiration, have received almost no attention from emotion researchers. But attention to such emotions is crucial for a full understanding of human morality. And I will be speaking today a bit about how my own virtue was restored by not creating art. Gloria told a great story about creating art, but rather by appreciating and consuming and observing and immersing myself in art as a way to heal my heart and to feel the elevation that Jefferson wrote those years ago. So a little background about this sermon. My wife, Kathy, is the director of the BAUUC Camp and Retreat Center in Central Texas by Kerrville. And next week, we will be having SWUSI, the Southwest Unitarian Universalist Summer Institute, which has been ongoing with interruptions since about 1936. She's as the organizer of SWUSI, there are religious elements, spiritual elements in it, and she asked me if I would prepare a homily for one of the short worship services by the swimming pool for next week. And I said I would, and the chosen theme for SWUSI this year is Musings of the Muses, M-U-U-S-I-N-G, M-U-U-S-E-S. But it's about art. It's about art and the muses. And I said I would, and I would prepare a homily, a short sermon for that. And so 3 weeks ago, when Reverend Katie said to me, hey, I'm filling holes in the Sunday worship calendar for the summer, and I'm particularly having a problem with the 14th of July. Could you provide a sermon? And I said I could, because I've already got one underway. So I said it's a little shorter fuse than I usually am used to working with, but I looked at my time budget and said I could do that. I didn't, as I was filling out the time budget, I didn't actually pencil in a hurricane in there, but and it wasn't. I've been here for 30-some years, and so this wasn't our worst hurricane. It wasn't Rita with the people stranded in traffic for 24 hours. It wasn't Ike with its horrible wind damage. It wasn't Harvey with its biblical floods. Beryl was sort of a good starter hurricane for people that are new to the Gulf Coast. But some of us have been without power. There may be people here right now who still don't have power in their homes. I know that parts of Friendswood and Clear Lake are still without power. I know that a lot of people in this room were out power for many days. It has been a shock, and yesterday brought terrible news. The scourge of assassination has returned to our politics. Like Beryl, this is an ill wind that blows no one any good. Many were already afraid for our nation, for our polity, and this dismays me even further. The sermon I wrote did not anticipate such ill winds, but I am suggesting a possible route for healing. Healing from psychic injury, healing from spiritual injury. May I today, speaking to you, may I be able to speak to the multiple shocks this congregation has borne just in this last week. "2023 was rough for me." After, we have the literature figure of Alice in Wonderland, Alice drowsing and seeing the rabbit run by and chasing after the rabbit, and the rabbit goes down the hole, and Alice follows the rabbit down the hole, and she tumbles and tumbles and ends up in a land, in a wonderland, where we're all mad here, she is told. She doesn't want to be among mad people, but that's what you get when you fall down a hole. In 2023, a family member of mine, someone I love, fell down a deep hole, and I followed. And I found my own madness, which was, well, it wore a lot of different hats and it wore a lot of different jackets, but it was all basically about me trying to control that which I was not meant to control. It was me not only wanting to control it, but actually feeling obligated to control, feeling guilty because I hadn't controlled it, feeling like I was born to control this, and if I'm going to be a good, upstanding man and a father, and I better control all this, and I couldn't. It didn't work that way, and so the backwash of that was fear, and family strife, and anger, and fear, and some recrimination and some blame, and did I mention fear? Yeah, I was plenty afraid, and I didn't come here this morning to confess anybody else's trouble or anybody else's tumbling down a hole, but I'll tell you that I fell down one too, and I'm pretty good about being self-revealing and confessing my own mistakes. You've heard me do that from this pulpit before, but if I tell it wrong, I'd be confessing somebody else's mistakes, and I try not to do that. But still, somebody else fell down a hole, I fell down a hole. It was all about control, and I got a big F in control. So something had to change. Something had to change. And I made a decision, I made a commitment to myself. I made a turning to heal my own turmoil. But how was I going to do that? Well, I found a support group. Started attending it 3 times a week. I lost some weight, and I made a commitment to myself that I was going to get out and start enjoying art in its many, many forms more. I was going to cobble together some kind of healing in my heart, some kind of serenity, some kind of surrender of the things that I could not control. I was going to put that together, and part of the plan was going to be I was going to watch, appreciate a whole lot more art. And I'll say as an aside, one of the small silver linings for me about, I work for BAUUC, and one of the small silver linings about this last week is that people haven't been asking me about embarrassing things about BAUUC because they've been pointing at Centerpoint. But BAUUC treated me very well. I was very, so there was this messy family situation, and I went to my boss, and I trusted my boss, and I told him about this story, and I said, I need to drop back because I'm going to this support group, and I also need to go to the theater, so I can only work 30 hours a week rather than 40 hours a week. And he was great. I trusted him with some kind of sensitive stuff, and he went to bat for me, and he worked with HR, and he said, the easiest way for us to do this is for you to invoke the Family Medical Leave Act, the FMLA, and you'll need a doctor's note. So do you think you can get a doctor's note? And I said, well, I think so. So I went to my doctor, and I said, Doctor, I said, I have anxiety. can I get an FMLA note on anxiety? He said, you can, but tell me about your anxiety. And I told him about my anxiety. And I told him about some crazy things that had happened and some things, you know, and the doctor said, you're an anxious man. You get a note. And then just to make sure that I dotted the I's and crossed the T's, I went and talked to Reverend Katie. And I had promised Reverend Katie that I would get some things done for the church. I was going to captain some covenant group stuff and some other promises. And I said, my life has gone crazy, and I'm not making some of my commitments. But let me tell you this story. When she did pretty good with pastoral counseling for me, and she said, "You're anxious. You should take a break." So I cut back on my workload, and so I could take better care of myself. And I kept going to the support group, and I managed to lose 15 pounds. And I promised myself. That I would start enjoying more art, more creative arts. Not, as I say, not particularly creating art. I didn't pick up the paintbrush and start painting the walls, but just attending and appreciating in it, soaking in it, observing it, and arranging carpools of bunches of people to go out and see art. And it worked. The punchline is that it worked, and I'll tell you some details about it. But it worked to heal me spiritually. And what do I mean talking to a UU congregation when I say spirituality? Because I remember years ago telling a friend of mine in this congregation, not here today, but telling him that I really treasured the spirituality of our church. And he said, when people talk about spirituality, I reach for my gun. And I said, you already told me you don't have a gun. But what do I mean by spirituality? For me, spirituality are the things that allow me to forget about myself, to quit focusing on myself, and to find myself, to have myself melt away into something greater, into something more inspiring, into something more beautiful, into something more whole than my little ego. So the things that make my ego drop away are the spirituality. And I get them here in this very room every week in the candles and in the chalice and in the choir and in the music and the piano music and the sacred words we say together. But I also need it the rest of the week in my life. I need some spirituality. And I got it from my support group, but I also, this year, started getting it out of the art. And some of you may be saying, well, that's great if you've got the time for it, but there are other things, better things you might be working on. There are more important things in going out and watching a play, and there are, but the historian Herbert Butterfield wrote about plucking beauty out of dangerous cracks and crevices. And he wrote, "It is not open to any of us to say that we will postpone what philosophers call the good life, postpone the higher purposes of humankind until the world is more happily placed or the environment becomes more congenial. Some people have become accustomed to arguing, for example, that we must not pretend to have any art today. For how can people write poetry when society is so disjointed?" And you could look at the headlines today and say, how can you be taking time for a play when look at all of the chaos and the danger and the threats in the world? And Butterfield wrote, "I have even heard it said that we must put aside all thought of the arts until the world has been made safe for democracy. If our forebears had taken that attitude in the past, there never would have been a civilization or a civilized ideal for us to inherit. And I do not know that Providence has ever promised to us either the Arcadian bliss or the reign of justice, which this argument seems to have in view. All the time it has been a case of plucking beauty out of dangerous crags and crevices, and making sure that there would be music somewhere, though apparently the world was generally near the edge of the abyss. And we must have our Elizabethan literature, even though the Spanish Armada may be coming, because it is always part of the game that the good life must be attained now, no matter at what date in history you place the word now. And I would commend that to you. I would commend that to you. Our good life must be attained now. And so we sing and we attend to music, and we go to the theater, and we come together to enjoy art together. So what art did I go appreciate? Well, I got a museum membership down at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. I had gone when my daughters were in high school, taking Rebecca there along with her friends, but her friends changed, and her new friends didn't want to go to the museum, and my wife wasn't as much as I am into looking at a bunch of paintings. So I hadn't been back since COVID, but I bought a +1 membership that allows me to go many times and take a friend. I can take a guest. And I went last night with Rebecca again. She's now studying art and wants to go back there. And we enjoyed several new opening shows just last night. And while we were down there, we ran into Robert and Nancy Pattison, longtime members of this church. They've moved to the other side of Houston. Because when you go out and enjoy art, you run into Unitarian Universalists, or at least I do. They say hi, by the way. And I got from it, what I got from the show last night is that there is beauty in this world that is beyond my ken. And it proceeds without me having to control it. And it soothes me and assures me, even as I am in turmoil. And so I was healed last night at the MFA. I went to live theater. I like dark comedy. I like dark comedy. My wife, not so much. But I had some friends in this congregation who would go with me to see like really dark comedy. But COVID had interrupted them, and they're like even now isolating as much as they can, and they're not available for dark comedy. So I reached out to other people in this congregation. There's people in the back row are saying, I like dark comedies. So I've been to more plays since last October than I had been in the previous 4 years, with friends, almost always with a friend here from BAUUC. And what I got from it was that even in the darkest stories, there is still laughter. It proceeds without me having to control it. It assures me that I can withstand evil and threat, even as I am in turmoil. And so I was healed. And one time, I had a friend of mine was going to go with me to see a dark comedy, and she got sick. And I had a spare ticket. And that Saturday, Terry Grimm was putting on a planning, visioning session for the church. So I came to part of it, and when there was a break, I said, hey, I've got a spare ticket. Won't somebody come with me and see the arts? And because UUs are the art hounds that we are, I got a volunteer, and I got to see Dirt Dog Theater. All these plays that I went to were pretty good, except one that was too dark for us. I mean, I went a little too dark, and it was just all of this screaming and chaos and no humor. It wasn't dark comedy. It was just dark, and we snuck out when there was a break in the action and just kind of caught our breaths. And a man came over to me. He said, I see you are you left without waiting for the end of the play. He said, why? And I said, well, it was just we came for the dark humor, and there wasn't any humor. I said, why did you leave? I said, were you another playgoer? He said, No, he said, I'm a newspaper critic for the plays, and it was too dark for me, too. So, but mostly I got healed when I went down and saw the Taizé. So I found a listing of organ concerts in Houston, and that led me to the sacred music listings, and it listed a concert and religious and a mass by the Taizé community at the Sisters of Charity convent. And I didn't know what that meant, but I looked for about the Sisters of Charity convent, and a site called Historic Houston says, located on the grounds of the Villa de Mattel complex is the Covenantal Chapel, undoubtedly the most beautiful structure in the city. We would be remiss if we failed to mention the existence of this special place. The interior is of concrete mosaic, inlaid Tavernella marble, and Venetian mosaics. The stained glass windows are as fantastic as the statuary. Symbolism is everywhere. The experience is akin to standing inside a jewel box that is bathed in sunlight. And I said, oh, I got to go to that. And I gathered up a crowd of mostly people from this church. And we went down there, and it was one of those times that I was so moved that I had the permission in my heart to cry. I was so moved by the organ concert and the incredible stained glass and the sacred music and the sacred musicians and the people coming up and kneeling before the cross and the candles and just this incredible architecture. It's only open a couple of times a year to the general public, but I'll be going back in November, and I think you'll see something in the newsletter. We're going to get a bunch of us down there. And what I learned from it is that there is beauty in the world that I didn't know about, that I didn't even suspect lived by me. There's beauty in the world that is beyond my ken, and it proceeds without me having to control it. I didn't have to organize it. I didn't have to be in charge. I just showed up, and it soothes me and it assures me, even as I am in turmoil, and so I was healed. And I went to a Metallica cover band with a crew of people from BAUUC, and I was careful. I brought foam earplugs because I know how I do with music once it gets up around 100 decibels. And it was not something I would have thought to do a year ago, but it was music of a sort that I hadn't indulged enough in. And I went and I brought UU friends, and what I got from it is that there's beauty in the world in categories that I had dismissed, and it proceeds without me having to control it, and I didn't have to be in charge, and it soothed me, and it assured me even as I was in turmoil, and so I was healed. And when we were down at the labyrinth, or when we were down at the Sisters of Charity convent, we found out about, they have a labyrinth. And and in March each year is World Labyrinth Day, when people around the world walk labyrinths at 1 o'clock, whatever your local time is, to pray for world peace. And so a group of us from this church and others went down to walk the labyrinth at the end of March. And we were greeted by Sister Margaret and another sister and a couple of novitiate nuns, and they led us out to the labyrinth, and it was a kind of different style of labyrinth than I had seen before. Instead of like a graveled path, it was a grass path with the walls of the labyrinth represented by bricks set in the ground. And Sister Margaret said, you can do what you want, but many of us find it soothing to walk the labyrinth in our bare feet and touching grass. And I hadn't planned on doing that, but I said, well, I'm in. So I went up by the mouth of the labyrinth and took off my shoes and took off my socks and made one step backwards into a fire ant mound. And I started jumping up and down and saying, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, which was not what I had planned in saying in front of 2 nuns and 2 novitiates. But Christy Gates came over with a bottle of water and managed to wash the fire ants off. And we had been told that we should have a prayer or a chant or a religious thought in our minds to repeat to ourselves as we were walking the labyrinth. And I had one in mind, but what kept coming out was, wish I'd left my shoes on. I wish I'd left my shoes on. Nonetheless, I walked the labyrinth, and they had a ritual at the center. It was a large labyrinth, which meant it had a large center, so 20-some of us could easily stand in the center of the labyrinth, and there was also a large steel pot there. And Sister Margaret had this basket full of prayers. She said every year they have events all year round. They have retreats. People bring their prayers and they write them down, and the sisters of the convent pray the prayers, pray over the prayers, pray for the people who wrote the prayers. And then once a year, they dismiss the prayers by burning the pieces of paper. And today, at the center of the labyrinth, that day at the center of the labyrinth was the day to burn the year's prayers that had been fully prayed through. And so each of us could take Margaret started the fire with a pile of prayers, and each of us got to take a handful of prayers and put them on there and say our own prayer over them. And we watched the prayers dissolve into the fire. We walked the labyrinth back. And this time, the worry about my bare feet had passed, and I could enjoy that. So what I learned from that was that there is beauty in the world from sources beyond my vision, and it proceeds without me having to control it, and it soothes me and assures me even as I am in turmoil. And I was in turmoil, but it soothed me and it assured me, and so I was healed. And a couple of nights ago, on Friday night, a group of us, some of us are here this morning, went to the Miller Outdoor Theater because there was a free show of American composers. And we sat on the lawn and we ran into other people from this church, because when I go out and enjoy the music and the symphony, I run into other people from this church, and you might too. And what I learned from that is that there is a thread that connects us and connects us, many threads that connect us in many ways, but one in particular that runs through this congregation, an appreciation and a hunger and a desire and a will towards the arts. And by connecting to that thread, I take in the richness of the music much more. I got a lot more out of the concert because I was with friends and I ran into other UUs there. And what I got from it is that there is beauty in the public spaces of Houston that I had too long neglected, and it proceeds without me having to control it. I don't have to do more than tell some friends that we'll rendezvous in the church parking lot. That's all the organization I have to do. The rest of it runs itself. It soothes me, and it assures me even as I am in turmoil. And so I was healed last night and the night before by the music and by the art and the pictures and by running into members of this congregation and going with members of this congregation. And I went, for my anniversary, Kathy and I were up in Kerrville, near Kerrville, and we went to Shakespeare in the Park. And we got to see a comedy for free in the park. And we turned around after we had sat down and we ran into a couple of UUs from the Kerrville congregation who were sitting right behind us, and which taught me that there is beauty even up in Kerrville. And it proceeds without us having to control it, and it soothed me and it assured me, and it was really nice to run into friends even when I go for art far from Houston. And so I was healed. And I haven't even told you about the blues bands or the guitarist playing on a barge by Clear Lake or a couple of ballet performances or the artwork of the gemstones in the Natural History Museum. They have this urn that's like this big, all carved out of a single piece of malachite, which just, I forget about myself. I just get blown away by this beautiful piece of art when I see that malachite urn. And that was the Natural History Museum and the Houston Botanic Gardens and a couple of chamber orchestra, some of which were for free. And does a cave count as art? Kathy and I, when we were on our anniversary trip up in Kerrville, went and explored a they call it a world.
Please join me in blessing the offering. This gift from the abundance of my life blesses me, our ministries, and the world. Okay, I have some announcements. We are calling on Saturday, next Saturday, July 20th, from 4 to 6 p.m. Mark your calendar and don't miss out on the fun. Middle schoolers and high schoolers. This invite is just for you. Let's make memories together. Attention all green thumbs and nature enthusiasts. Join us in nurturing our community garden located next to the church parking lot out here. Our next monthly work day is this Saturday, July 20th. It is blooming with opportunities to lend a helping hand from 8 a.m. till 11:15 a.m. So next Saturday, 8 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. No gardening experience is needed. Just bring your enthusiasm and willingness to grow together. Swing by any time after 8:15 and sow the seeds of community spirit with us. Immediately after today's service, members and friends are invited to join us to mingle over coffee and enjoy light snacks in Cockrell Hall, down this hall and left. If you would like to donate snacks or help with setting them out, please use a sign-up sheet that's available there. Let's come together and share some quality time as a community. And after coffee today, please join us for lunch at Denny's at 2735 Bay Area Boulevard. That's next to University of Houston, right? Right. University of Houston. We called to make sure it is open. All visitors, friends, and members are welcome. Find out more from David. And finally, here at BAUUC, we understand the importance of staying connected with our community. That's why we offer a weekly email newsletter every Tuesday with the latest news and events happening at our church. Don't miss out on the opportunity to engage in meaningful activities and connect with fellow members. Sign up for our email list today by going to BAUUC.org and join our community of spiritual growth, fellowship, and fun. You can also sign the visitor book, which is in the parlor there, and give us your legible email address, and we can get you signed up without your having to go to the website. We'll sign you up just by if you sign that book back there. So that is what I have for today. We have a yes. Parents group today at 12:30 in Cockrell Hall. No power, get lunch. Okay. Please open your gray hymnals for our closing song, number 57, All Beautiful, the March of Days.
We extinguish our chalice, but not the light of love nor the fire of commitment. Be at peace, be healed, cleave to this community, cleave to the arts, cleave to any beautiful thing that comes your way. For each of us needs to be healed, and each of us, when we are healed, can bring another along. Be therefore at peace. Amen.